The cafe doors swung open with a soft chime, letting in a swirl of cool night air that carried the faint scent of rain. Inside, warmth radiated through dim lights and the hum of conversation, but at one small table tucked in the corner sat a young woman who seemed to belong everywhere and nowhere at once. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped her purse, pressing it close against her chest as though it carried something precious. Inside were only 5 worn dollar bills, folded and refolded so many times they had softened like fabric. That was all she had for the night, yet she had chosen to come anyway. Her dress was borrowed from a neighbor, one size too loose around the shoulders, and her shoes, though polished, showed the faint scuff marks of long use. Still, she held her head high, hiding the storm of nerves twisting in her chest. Tonight was supposed to be special. A blind date. A chance, perhaps, for something more than the endless routine of scraping by. When her date arrived, tall and well-dressed, hope flared inside her. But within minutes, it burned out. He looked at the menu, frowned, and when she softly admitted she could only afford tea, his smile sharpened into a smirk. Moments later, he excused himself with a hollow excuse about urgent business, and walked away without looking back. She sat frozen, shame flooding her like ice water, the room spinning with laughter that suddenly felt cruel. She lowered her gaze, praying no one had noticed her humiliation. But someone had. Just a few tables away, a man in a tailored suit, his watch glinting under the cafe light, had watched the entire scene unfold. He wasn't just any man, he was a father, a CEO, and yet in that moment, simply a human who recognized quiet dignity when he saw it. The waiter returned, his pen poised, his voice low and polite. "Will it only be tea tonight?" Her face flushed crimson, her lips parted but no words came. She wanted to vanish into the chair, to melt into invisibility. Before she could stammer an answer, another voice broke the silence, firm but warm, carrying no trace of pity. "Add dinner for 2, the man from the next table said calmly. "Put it on my tab." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. She turned her head, startled, and their eyes met. His gaze held no judgment, only a quiet steadiness that made her heart ache. She wanted to refuse, to cling to her pride, but her body betrayed her with the faint rumble of hunger. He didn't push, didn't hover, didn't make her feel small. He simply turned slightly away, giving her space to decide for herself. When the food finally arrived, steaming and fragrant, she bowed her head and whispered, "Thank you." He smiled faintly, not leaning closer, not taking advantage. His only words were, "Eat. You deserve a warm meal. Nothing more." She picked up her fork slowly, tasting each bite as if it carried hope itself. Across the table, he quietly remembered the struggles of his own daughter. When the last bite was gone and the plate cleared away, she folded her napkin with care, as if tidiness could shield her from the weight in her chest. She prepared to leave, but the silence between them begged to be broken. Finally, she turned, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't embarrassed because he left," she confessed, her eyes glistening. "I'm embarrassed because I still came, knowing I only had $5. It's all I have until payday." Her words trembled in the air like fragile glass. The man leaned back, not with arrogance but with reverence, and studied her quietly. "Don't apologize for showing up," he said gently. "That's more courage than most people ever find." She shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "People don't see courage. They see lack. They see poor." The honesty in her voice pierced him deeper than any business loss ever had. For a long moment, he said nothing, then spoke softly, almost as though speaking to himself. I've built skyscrapers, led companies, yet the bravest thing I've ever witnessed is a young woman ordering tea with her last $5. She blinked, stunned. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not shamed. The waiter placed a folded slip of paper gently onto the table as he cleared the dishes. She reached for it with hesitation, thinking it might be her bill, an amount she could never cover with the few crumpled dollars still in her purse. But when she opened it, her breath caught. The note was short, written in careful script: "Your meals are covered for the next month." Quietly. Kindly. No repayment needed. Her hand shook as she read it twice, her eyes brimming. She looked up, her gaze locking onto the man just a table away. "Why?" she whispered, her voice fragile, yet filled with a storm of questions. He exhaled slowly, his eyes softening as memories washed over him. "Because once, I was you. I had nothing but pride, and a little girl who depended on me. A stranger's kindness didn't just feed us, it reminded me that life could still be generous." His voice trembled slightly at the end, and for a moment she glimpsed not a powerful man, but a father who had walked through fire. Her tears slipped down freely. She had always believed kindness belonged in movies, not in life. Yet here it was, sitting across from her in the form of a stranger who asked for nothing. He leaned in just enough to anchor his words, never crossing her dignity. "When you graduate, when you rise, promise me something. Pass it forward. Not to me, not to my daughter, but to someone who sits where you sat tonight." The word graduate struck her like a lightning bolt. How could he know that dream had carried her through sleepless nights and hunger? She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, whispering, "I promise." At that moment, the door swung open, and his daughter rushed in, her arms wrapping around him in joy. Watching them, the young woman felt something shift deep inside. She had not only been seen, she had been given hope. The years rolled by like pages turning in a book, each one carrying her closer to the promise she made that night. Struggles never vanished, there were nights of hunger, days of exhaustion, and moments when her body wanted to give up. But the memory of that café, of the man who honored her when the world dismissed her, became her anchor. And now, she stood on a stage beneath blinding lights, wrapped in a gown and cap, her diploma clutched tightly in her hands. The auditorium roared with applause as her name echoed across the hall. She was the valedictorian. She had made it. She stepped to the podium, her voice steady though her heart quaked. She spoke of sacrifice, of parents who worked themselves weary, of nights she studied under flickering lamps. Then her voice softened, trembling as she added, "But there was one night, when a stranger's kindness reminded me that my story wasn't over. That I was still worthy." Her words silenced the room, tears glistening in countless eyes. In the crowd, an older man sat quietly, his silver hair catching the light. Beside him, his daughter, now grown, squeezed his hand. His eyes shone with pride, though he had never told her he was coming. After the ceremony, as people spilled into embraces and laughter, she descended the stage. And then she froze. There he was, standing before her, a gentle smile on his face. "You came," she whispered, her tears falling freely. "I told you," he said softly, "kindness is meant to be carried forward." She reached into her purse and pressed something into his palm, a single, crumpled $5 bill. "This was all I had the night you found me. Tonight, it's all I have left after tuition. But it's worth more than gold, because it carries my promise." He closed his hand around it, his eyes glistening. In that sacred moment, kindness had come full circle. Humanity had won.